Why did the laughter echo louder than the silence of the square? It was sharp, almost cruel, cutting through the otherwise hushed reverence of the palace grounds. A tourist, camera dangling from his neck, grin plastered across his face, had leaned too close to the queen's guard. He chuckled, then outright laughed, expecting to amuse his friends, expecting nothing in return. The guards were supposed to be statues, after all. Figures of tradition, untouchable, unbreakable. But then just one step. A single, precise movement of the soldier's boot striking stone. The sound, crisp, final, snapped through the air. The laughter died in the man's throat, replaced by startled silence. Around him the crowd froze, phones lowered, breath caught. All it took was one step to remind them all, dignity does not bow to mockery. Yet in the shadows, watching quietly from the edges of the square, the woman felt something stir deep within her chest. She was not part of the spectacle, not another tourist, not even a passerby. She was a soldier. She recognized what most missed, the weight behind that single step, the discipline, the years of silence turned into strength. Her fingers grazed the rough stitching of her sleeve, not the ceremonial red of a guard's uniform. Olive green, faded, worn, carrying the smell of oil and dust no detergent could wash out. She hadn't worn it for weeks, not since arriving back in London. But she still felt it on her skin, a second layer of herself. And as the crowd murmured in awe, she thought of her own guard post, far away under a different flag with no cameras, no tourists. Only mud, wind, and shadows. She thought of the night when laughter had cut through the silence there too. Only it wasn't careless. It wasn't mockery. It was cruel. It was the laughter of men who believed she wouldn't fight back. She had endured that night in silence, just as the guard endured now. But for her, silence was not just tradition, it was survival. The square emptied slowly, tourists drifting off with their stories and their shaky recordings. The guard returned to stillness, unflinching once more. The woman stayed a little longer, her boots planted firmly, her eyes locked on him. Why did one mocking laugh open a wound she thought was sealed? Why did a stranger's step pull her back into memories she had buried under layers of discipline and distance? She did not have the answer, not yet. Rain began to fall later that night, thin and steady, darkening the cobblestones around the barracks. She stood outside, arms loose at her sides, letting the cold drops soak through her shirt. Others rushed to cover, pulling hoods tight, muttering about the weather. But she didn't move. The rain was grounding, a reminder she was still here, still flesh, not ghost. Still awake, a voice came from behind. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Lieutenant Harrow. His presence carried a weight of its own. A tall man with tired eyes that always seemed to see more than he said. His fatigue was permanent now, etched into his face like scars. "I was listening," she said, her voice low, steady. "To what?" "The spaces between the rain." He stepped closer, quiet enough to let her words linger. He tilted his head as though trying to hear what she heard. Rain hitting the tin roof above, water dripping from gutters, the rhythmic patter against the earth. But in between there were pauses, small silences that spoke louder than the storm itself. "You ever think about what fills those spaces?" she asked after a beat. "Nothing," he said softly, "or everything." A faint smile touched her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Depends on the night." Harrow studied her for a moment, but he didn't push. He had learned long ago that some silences weren't meant to be broken. He gave a simple nod and left her standing in the rain. She closed her eyes, and in that stillness another rain returned to her. Not in London, not gentle, but fierce, pounding against her helmet in a valley where she had stood for hours, waiting for a signal that never came. She remembered the ache in her muscles, the sting of wet earth crawling into her boots, the pounding heartbeat in her ears, and the laughter, cruel, distant, carried across the valley like an echo from hell. Her hands curled into fists now, though the rain in London was nothing like that storm. Here it was cleansing. There it had been a countdown. She opened her eyes, staring into the night. The guard's step earlier still replayed in her mind. One movement, one warning, one act of dignity. She wondered when her own silence had been tested, had she done the same, or had she failed? The answer gnawed at her, but she didn't let it surface. Not yet. The next morning the barracks came alive with the hum of duty. Boots struck against stone in rhythm. Doors slammed. Voices called out. And yet at the briefing table she sat unacknowledged. Maps spread across the long wooden surface. Red pins stabbed like wounds across regions they'd studied for weeks. Harrow spoke. Others muttered agreements, gave quick reports. Orders were exchanged like currency, heavy but necessary. And still her voice remained absent. Why was everyone ignoring her? She didn't blame them, not fully. She hadn't given them a reason to listen. She kept her silence because silence felt safer. But inside she knew the truth. Her words, when spoken, carried weight that couldn't be taken back. And once she let them in, once she revealed the thing she carried, everything would change. She remembered Afghanistan, the convoy that hadn't returned, the little boy running into the road, clutching a toy that wasn't a toy. She remembered the way her finger froze on the trigger, the hesitation that cost lives. She remembered the debrief after, the officers asking questions she couldn't answer, the eyes that looked at her with judgment, with pity. And she remembered the silence she wrapped around herself afterward, as if silence could shield her from blame. So now here she let them ignore her, let them treat her as stone. It was easier than opening old wounds. But still silence has its breaking point, and hers was approaching. That night she walked the perimeter alone. The air smelled of damp earth, heavy with the remnants of rain. The sky hung low, clouds like ash smothering the stars. Her boots pressed deep into the mud, leaving imprints that would be gone by morning. She counted each step in her head, 1, 2, 3, letting the rhythm quiet the noise inside. A voice broke the silence, young, tentative, "Ma'am." She turned to see Reyes jogging to catch up. Barely 20. A boy, really, though war had carved shadows into his face already. His rifle bounced awkwardly against his chest as he slowed to her pace. Do you ever feel like it's all for nothing?" he asked, his tone quiet, almost ashamed. She stopped walking. The question hung heavy in the air. His eyes were wide, searching, almost pleading. The silence stretched. She could hear his breathing, uneven, nervous. She could feel the weight of his question pressing against her chest, forcing her to remember every night she had asked herself the same. Every morning she had stared at her reflection, wondering if the uniform was armor or a cage. She wanted to tell him the truth. That yes, some nights it felt like nothing. That yes, some mornings she doubted every step. That the ghost she carried felt heavier than her rifle, heavier than her own body. But she didn't. Instead, she said, her voice calm but firm, "The nothing you fear is where everything begins." Reyes frowned, not fully understanding, but he nodded slowly. Sometimes it wasn't about the answer. Sometimes it was just about being heard. He left a few minutes later, muttering thanks, though his shoulders still sagged under invisible weight. Only when he was gone did she let her face falter. Not tears, never tears, but the shadow of them. The tightness in her jaw, the ache behind her eyes. Silence again, but this silence was not endurance, it was confession. She tilted her head back toward the sky. Clouds shifted, just enough to reveal a single star burning faintly. For a moment she let herself hope. But then she dropped her gaze back to the mud. Hope was dangerous, and she knew better than to trust it. Her silence, though unbroken, was beginning to crack. And soon she would have to decide, would she keep it sealed? Or would she let the truth spill out even if it drowned her? The guard's single step still echoed in her mind, one act that changed everything. And she wondered, when her moment came, would she find the strength to do the same? Why was she still awake, long after the others had drifted into uneasy sleep? The barracks hummed with the quiet rhythm of exhausted breathing. Boots had been kicked under bunks. Rifles leaned against lockers. A faint light flickered from the hallway bulb, buzzing now and then like a trapped insect. Everyone else had surrendered to fatigue. But she lay still, eyes open, her body rigid under the thin blanket. Her mind wouldn't let her rest. Every creak of the building, every drip of water from a leaky pipe sharpened her senses. To others, these sounds were background noise. To her, they were warnings. She had trained herself to hear danger in silence, to read messages in the pauses between breaths. Once you learn that, you can never unlearn it. She sat up quietly, moving with the practiced grace of someone who didn't need light to see. She slid her boots on, laced them tightly, and slipped outside. The night air was cold, damp with the smell of rain-soaked earth. She lit no cigarette. She needed nothing to distract her, just the rhythm of her own steps as she walked the narrow path around the barracks. Halfway through her loop, she saw movement in the shadows. Her body tensed, but it was only Harrow. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice low. She shook her head. "Noise." He looked around, puzzled. "Noise, it's dead quiet." "Exactly," she whispered. "That's the noise." He studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she was joking. But she was. She never was. Finally he nodded. "You're not wrong. Silence can be loud." For a few minutes, they walked side by side without speaking. The gravel crunched under their boots, the only sound between them. Then he asked, almost cautiously, "You ever think about why you're still here, after everything?" The question landed heavy. She didn't answer right away. Her instinct was silence, always silence. But something in his tone, gentle, weary, pulled at her. "I don't know," she said at last. "Sometimes I think I stayed because I couldn't go home. Sometimes I think it's because I don't know what home is anymore." Harrow didn't press. He just walked with her until the loop ended. Then he gave her a quiet nod and left her standing in the cold. She watched him go, then turned her eyes to the horizon. In the distance, faint lights flickered where the city never slept. Somewhere in those lights were people who had never carried a rifle, who had never buried a friend, who laughed without fear. She wondered what it felt like to live that kind of life. But she didn't let herself linger on it. She turned away and went back inside. Sleep still didn't come. Morning came heavy, thick with mist that clung to the ground. The soldiers gathered for the daily briefing, their faces pale in the fluorescent light. She sat at the edge of the table, eyes sharp, posture straight. Maps again. Red pins, arrows sketched hastily with markers. Words she had heard before: insurgents, checkpoints, supply lines. She traced the map with her eyes, but her mind drifted elsewhere. To another map, another room, another table where she had once been ignored just the same. Her silence then had been misunderstood. They thought she had nothing to say, but she had plenty, too much. She had details burned into her memory, faces, voices, coordinates, smells that she could never forget. But to speak them aloud meant reliving them, and reliving them meant breaking. So she kept quiet, even now. Harrow's voice droned on, briefing the team about the next mission. His words were steady, professional, but she noticed his hand tapping against the edge of the table, an unconscious rhythm that betrayed nerves. He wasn't as unshakable as he wanted them to believe. The others spoke in clipped tones. Questions, orders, jokes to lighten the weight. No one looked at her, no one asked her opinion. It was easier that way. But something inside her stirred as she watched them point to a village on the map. A familiar name, a familiar route. Her chest tightened. She hadn't told them this was personal, not yet. That evening she found herself by the fence, staring out into the fields beyond. The air was cool, the grass swayed with the breeze. But her mind was far away, pulled back to a dusty road halfway across the world. She remembered the convoy, the roar of engines, the choking dust, the radio crackling with half-finished words, and then the boy. 8 years old, maybe 9, a small figure running into the road. At first she thought he was lost. Then she saw the object in his hands, bright red, too bright, A toy? No, not a toy. Her finger had hovered over the trigger. Her breath had stopped. 1 second, two. Enough time to act, enough time to decide. But she froze. The explosion tore through the convoy. Fire, smoke, screams. She remembered the sound of twisted metal, the smell of burning fuel, the silence that followed. She had survived, others hadn't. The boy was gone. The wreckage was all that remained, and her silence afterward had been unbearable. She had never forgiven herself, not for the hesitation, not for the lives lost, not for the silence that followed. And now here she was, staring at a map with the same road marked in red, the same village, the same silence threatening to consume her. She gripped the fence so hard her knuckles went white. She hadn't told them, not yet. The next day the soldiers prepared for the mission, gear packed, weapons checked, vehicles lined up. She stood near the rear, adjusting her rifle strap, tightening her vest. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic. She checked every buckle twice, every strap 3 times, obsession disguised as discipline. Reyes approached, shifting nervously from foot to foot. He looked younger in daylight, almost like a boy playing soldier. But his eyes, those eyes carried questions too heavy for his age. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" She glanced at him, silent. "Do you ever feel like no matter what we do, it won't change anything? That it'll just keep happening again and again?" Her throat tightened. The boy's words cut too close. She wanted to tell him the truth. That yes, sometimes it felt endless. That yes, sometimes it felt like every mission was just a different version of the same nightmare. That she had asked herself that very question more times than she could count. But she couldn't burden him with that truth. He was already carrying too much. So she answered carefully. Change doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it's one step. Sometimes it's one breath. Sometimes it's just one person still standing when the smoke clears. Reyes frowned, trying to absorb the words. And if no one's standing? She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then silence will stand for them. He didn't fully understand, but he nodded, grateful for any answer at all. When he walked away, she let her mask slip again, just for a moment. Her chest ached. Her silence pressed against her like armor that had grown too heavy. But she tightened the straps on her vest and forced herself to stand taller. The engines roared to life. Soldiers climbed into the vehicles. The air was thick with exhaust, with tension. She climbed into the back of the truck, her rifle resting across her knees. The others murmured, nervous jokes, half-formed prayers, promises of drinks when they returned. She stayed quiet. But inside the storm raged. This wasn't just another mission. This was her road, her silence, her past catching up to her. Would she freeze again? Would she fail again? Would her silence cost more lives? She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She tried to imagine the guard's single step, that one movement that silenced laughter, that reminded everyone of dignity. She tried to imagine herself doing the same when the moment came. But doubt gnawed at her. What if she could? What if silence swallowed her again? The vehicle jolted forward, rattling over rough ground. She tightened her grip on the rifle. The mission had begun. And she knew, one way or another, silence would break. Why did the road feel heavier than the trucks rolling over it? The convoy moved slowly, engines humming, tires grinding against dirt packed hard by years of boots and wheels. Dust rose behind them, hanging in the pale morning light like ghosts refusing to settle. Inside the rear vehicle, she sat with her rifle resting across her knees, eyes fixed on the blurred horizon. The village lay ahead, the same road, the same path that had once torn her life into before and after. Her body was steady, but her mind was at war. Every bump in the road felt like a memory trying to surface. Every curve felt like a loop of history tightening around her throat. She adjusted her grip, knuckles whitening. She had promised herself not to freeze again, but promises made in silence were the hardest to keep. The driver muttered something under his breath. Reyes, seated across from her, glanced nervously at the open flap of canvas, scanning the terrain. His leg bounced restlessly, the rhythm quick and uneven. "You all right?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, startled by her voice. It was rare for her to speak unprompted. "Yeah," he said quickly, "just can't shake this feeling." "What feeling?" "Like the ground waiting for us, like it's listening." Her chest tightened. He wasn't wrong. The silence of the earth was the loudest thing of all. She didn't answer, she couldn't. The convoy slowed. Harrow's voice crackled over the radio. "Approaching checkpoint, eyes up, stay sharp." She shifted in her seat, pulling the rifle close. Her breath slowed, deliberate, steady. Around her, the others adjusted gear, tightened helmets, checked safeties. The truck stopped. She listened, really listened. The hum of engines idling, the whisper of wind through dry grass, the faint call of a bird overhead, but underneath it all nothing. No footsteps, no chatter of villagers, no sounds of life. Too quiet. She tapped Reyes on the knee, signaling him without words. His eyes widened, but he nodded. The driver shifted uneasily, something off. Before Harrow could respond, the world erupted. The first shot cracked through the air, sharp and merciless. It wasn't close, but it was enough to shatter the silence. The convoy scattered into practice chaos. Doors flung open. Boots hit dirt. Voices shouted commands over the roar of engines and the echo of gunfire. She moved without hesitation this time. Rifle up, eyes scanning, body pressed against the truck's frame. Bullets struck dirt nearby, spitting dust into the air. Reyes froze for a second, eyes darting wildly. She grabbed his vest, yanked him down behind cover. His chest heaved, breath sharp, panicked. "Breathe," she hissed. "Look at me." His eyes snapped to hers. She held his gaze, steady, calm, unflinching. "We don't freeze, not now." Something in her tone steadied him. His breathing slowed. He nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. She turned back, scanning the ridgeline. Shadows flickered between rocks. Movement. She lined up her sight, finger poised. And then her vision blurred. For a split second, she wasn't on this road. She was back there years ago. The boy, the red toy, the explosion, the smoke, the silence afterward. Her finger hovered. Hesitation again. Her chest burned. No, not this time. She exhaled slowly, steadying her aim, pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing through the valley. A shadow fell, not a boy, not a ghost, a man with a rifle. The spell broke. She fired again, and again, controlled bursts, each shot measured, deliberate, no freezing, not this time. Around her, the others returned fire. Harrow barked commands, his voice firm despite the chaos. The air filled with the stench of cordite and dust, the roar of weapons clashing with the silence of fear. She moved like water, flowing between cover, guiding Reyes when his movements faltered, anchoring the line when it threatened to break. Minutes felt like hours. Then slowly the gunfire tapered. The attackers retreated, shadows fading into the distance. Silence returned, heavy and thick. The soldiers regrouped, breathless, shaken, alive. Reyes sat against the truck, chest heaving, sweat streaking down his face. He stared at her, eyes wide, words caught in his throat. Finally, he managed. You didn't freeze." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Not this time. But inside, her heart still raced with the weight of almost. The hesitation had been there, like a ghost gripping her hand. She had fought it, barely. Harrow approached, dust clinging to his uniform, a shallow cut bleeding down his cheek. He studied her for a long moment. "Good work," he said simply. "No more, no less." She gave a small nod. But she felt no pride, only relief. The convoy pushed forward. The road stretched ahead, long and unforgiving. The village lay just beyond the next ridge. Inside the truck again, Reyes sat quieter now. His hand still trembled slightly, but there was something new in his eyes. Respect, trust, a silent gratitude he didn't know how to voice. She looked away out at the passing landscape. The earth seemed calm again, but she knew better. Calm was a mask. Silence was a trap. Her thoughts drifted back to the boy, to the convoy that hadn't returned, to the silence that had followed her across years and continents. She had broken it today for a moment, but silence wasn't done with her. It never was. By the time they reached the outskirts of the village, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. Houses of mud and stone stood quiet, doors shut, windows empty. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though no fire burned. The soldiers dismounted, weapons raised, eyes sharp. The silence here was different, not the silence of waiting, the silence of absence. She moved cautiously, scanning rooftops, alleys, doorways. Every creak of wood, every rustle of cloth made her heart pound. "Clear the square," Harrow ordered. They spread out, boots echoing on stone. The square was empty, too empty. Reyes whispered, "Where is everyone?" No one answered. She felt it then, the same weight as before, the ground listening, the silence watching. Her chest tightened, her finger brushed the trigger. Something was wrong. And deep inside she knew, the silence was about to break again. The mission wasn't over, it had only begun. And for her this wasn't just another fight. This was the road she had left unfinished, the silence she had never escaped. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but ready or not, the truth was waiting. And silence doesn't wait forever. The village was a labyrinth of shadows. Narrow alleys twisted between mud-brick walls, their faded colors blending with the dust that seemed to hang eternally in the air. Wooden shutters creaked softly in the wind, yet not a single face appeared behind them. The absence of life was louder than any gunfire. She moved with the others through the square, rifle raised, boots careful on the uneven stones. Her pulse was steady now, though her mind stayed sharp, coiled tight like a spring. Something about the air here felt unnatural, not just abandoned, but staged. Reyes walked at her side, his breathing shallow, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "It's like a graveyard," he whispered. She gave a small nod. He wasn't wrong. Captain Harrow raised his fist, signaling the unit to halt. His voice cut through the radio. "Teams Alpha and Bravo, clear the northern block. Charlie, secure the well. Echo, sweep east with me." She fell in with Harrow's group. The square opened into a row of narrow homes, doors ajar, belongings scattered inside as if their owners had fled in haste. Her boots crunched on broken pottery. She scanned each doorway, each cracked wall. Then she heard it. A faint sound, too soft for most ears but not for hers, a breath, a shift of weight, human. She raised a hand, motioning silence. Harrow caught it, froze mid-step. The sound came again, from behind a crooked wooden door half broken on its hinges. Her heart beat louder, memories swelled. Another door, another time, another silence before chaos. She gripped her rifle tighter, forcing herself to move. Harrow gave a nod. She stepped forward first. Her boot pushed the door open with a slow creak. Inside, the room was dim. Dust floated in thin shafts of light cutting through slits in the wall, and there, in the corner, a woman kneeling, arms wrapped around two children pressed tightly against her chest. The silence shattered, not with sound but with the sheer weight of what she saw. The children's eyes were wide, unblinking, filled with terror. The woman's lips moved soundlessly, prayers carried only in breath. Her rifle lowered on instinct. She wasn't looking at combatants. She was looking at survival. Behind her, Reyes muttered, "Civilians." Harrow entered, gun steady. He scanned the woman, the children, then the corners of the room. Check for threats. She obeyed, sweeping quickly. Empty, just a family caught between silence and fear. She turned back. The woman's gaze locked with hers, pleading, unspoken. She understood. This wasn't just silence. This was the silence of people who had seen too much, lost too much. "Clear," she said softly. Harrow gave a curt nod. "Move them to the square, secure them." As Reyes helped the woman and children to their feet, she felt the woman's hand brush hers briefly. Rough, trembling, a silent plea. She couldn't promise safety, but she could promise she wouldn't freeze, not this time. Hours passed as they cleared more of the village. They found others, an old man too frail to flee, a teenager hiding in the shadow of a collapsed roof, a mother clutching a baby wrapped in a faded blanket. Each face was a reminder. Silence wasn't empty. It was full of fear, grief, desperation. But no armed fighters, no resistance, not yet. By dusk, the villagers sat gathered in the square, guarded by soldiers. The sun dipped low, casting long, bloody streaks of light across the broken walls. The air grew colder. Harrow paced slowly, radio in hand, voice clipped. "Command, this is Echo. Village secured. Minimal civilians. No hostiles located." Static crackled in reply then. "Hold position. Await further orders." He clipped the radio back, jaw tight. He didn't like waiting. Neither did she. She stood at the edge of the square, eyes fixed on the rooftops. The silence here was alive, breathing, waiting. Every instinct told her something was coming. Reyes joined her, lowering himself to sit on a crumbled step. "You ever get the feeling?" He trailed off, searching for words. "What?" she asked quietly. "That silence is the worst sound of all." She glanced at him. His eyes were tired, young, too young for the weight he carried. But he was right. Silence wasn't absence. Silence was pressure. She gave a small nod. It always means something. His gaze searched hers as if trying to find answers she didn't have. But then something shifted. His expression softened. He saw it now. She wasn't frozen. She wasn't unreachable. She was fighting the same silence he was. And somehow that was enough. Night fell. The unit made camp in the square, soldiers posted at corners, rifles ready. Fires were forbidden. Only the cold glow of equipment lit their faces. The civilians huddled together, whispering prayers, their voices low and trembling. She sat with her back against a wall, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the shadows. Reyes sat nearby, silent this time, fatigue pulling at his frame. Harrow moved like a restless ghost, checking positions, murmuring into the radio, his face grim. The hours dragged, silence stretched, and then a sound. Distant at first, then closer. Footsteps many. Her body tensed. She rose smoothly, rifle at the ready, eyes narrowing at the darkness beyond the square. Reyes jolted awake. "What is it?" "Movement." Harrow appeared instantly, rifle raised. The other soldiers adjusted, tightening their perimeter. From the shadows of the alleys, figures emerged. Not one, dozens. Men with rifles slung across their shoulders, faces hard, eyes sharp, locals, fighters, silent until now. The villagers in the square gasped softly, clutching one another. The fighters advanced, not firing, not shouting, just walking steady, deliberate. The silence was suffocating. Her finger hovered on the trigger, her heart pounded. Harrow's voice cut the air, low but firm. "Hold, do not engage." The fighters stopped just short of the square, lining the edges of shadow and light. Their leader stepped forward, a man with a thick beard and eyes that burned like embers in the night. He raised a hand, not in greeting, not in surrender, but in command. And then finally, the silence broke. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was deep, heavy with certainty. Her blood ran cold. The road hadn't brought her back to finish something. It had brought her back to face it. The silence was over. The confrontation had begun. Why didn't anyone move? The village square was frozen in a tableau of dread. On one side her unit, soldiers tense, rifles raised, breath fogging in the cold night air. On the other, the fighters, dozens of them, emerging like shadows given form, weapons ready, eyes hard, waiting. The civilians huddled between, silent, pressed together as though the ground itself could swallow them into safety. Mothers held children close. An old man clutched prayer beads, lips moving quickly, silently. She stood at the line, rifle steady, finger brushing the trigger. Her pulse thundered, her eyes fixed on the bearded man who had spoken, his words still echoing in her head. "You shouldn't have come here." Harrow stepped forward, slow, measured. His rifle didn't waver, his voice carried low but sharp. "This is not your fight, step back." The man didn't blink. "Every inch of this is our fight." He gestured toward the civilians with a subtle tilt of his chin. "And they," he let the words hang heavy, "are ours." The air grew colder, tighter. She swallowed, her throat dry. The villagers' faces flashed before her eyes, the woman clutching her children, the teenager hiding beneath a collapsed roof, the infant swaddled in a worn blanket. "Ours," she thought, "or yours to use." Reyes muttered near her shoulder, voice trembling but fierce. "We can't let them take the villagers." Her jaw clenched. No, they couldn't. But was this the moment? The line between resistance and slaughter was razor-thin. Harrow's hand lifted, signaling restraint. His voice dropped into the radio clipped to his chest. "Command, we have armed contact. Civilians present, requesting guidance." Static hissed, then silence. No orders, no voice from above, just them. The bearded man took another step forward, the fighters shifting with him. The scrape of boots on stone was louder than thunder in that suffocating square. Her breath shortened. She remembered another night, another silence before the breaking, a doorway, a child, the flash of a weapon, the weight of her own hesitation. Not again. Not here. The man's eyes locked on hers, as if he could see the storm behind her gaze. He tilted his head, almost curious. "You've been here before," he said quietly, his accent rough but words clear. The hairs on her neck bristled. How could he know? "You carry it," he continued. "Regret, like all of you who come here thinking you can save what is not yours to save." Her rifle tightened in her grip. His words pierced deeper than any bullet. She wanted to shout back, to deny it, but her throat stayed shut. He wasn't wrong. She did carry it. She carried that doorway, that silence, that child, always. Reyes whispered urgently, "What's he doing?" But she knew. The man wasn't speaking to Harrow. He wasn't speaking to the soldiers. He was speaking to her. Then movement. A child broke from the cluster of civilians. A boy, no older than 8, stumbling forward, his eyes wide, his body shaking. He looked from one side to the other, caught between rifles and shadows, fear radiating off him like heat. The man extended a hand toward the boy. "Come." Her heart stopped. The boy hesitated, his gaze darting to her. Their eyes met for a split second. She saw herself in him, the fear, the confusion, the desperate search for something solid in a world of guns. "No," she whispered under her breath. Harrow's voice snapped, "Hold your fire." Reyes shifted, almost breaking formation. His voice cracked, "We can't just let." The boy took a step closer to the fighters. She moved before thought could stop her. Her rifle dipped, her other hand outstretched. "Wait." Her voice cut through the silence, not a command, not a threat, just human. The boy froze, caught between her hand and the fighter's beckon. His chest rose and fell in quick bursts. Tears glistened in the low light. The fighter's hand lowered slightly, his eyes narrowing, watching her, measuring her. Every second stretched into eternity. Then the boy turned, slowly, and stumbled back toward the villagers, into his mother's arms. The square exhaled. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked from the boy to her. A shadow of something unreadable passed over his face, anger maybe, or respect. He raised his hand again, a signal. The fighters shifted their rifles. Her heart pounded. This was it. But then another signal. They lowered them. Not dropped, not surrendered, just lowered. The man's voice carried like gravel dragged across stone. "We will not fight tonight, but you," his eyes burned into hers, "you carry ghosts. They will decide how long you last." And with that, the fighters melted back into the alleys, shadows swallowing them whole. The silence returned, heavier than before. Her breath trembled as she exhaled. Her arms ached from holding her rifle so rigid. Reyes collapsed onto the stone step, dragging a hand across his face. What the hell just happened? Harrow barked into his radio again, fury in his voice. "Command, Echo, hostiles withdrew. We're holding with civilians. We need extraction. Now." Static, then faint acknowledgement. She sank onto the edge of the fountain in the square, the cold stone biting through her gear. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from restraint, from holding back the storm inside her. Reyes glanced at her, his eyes raw. "That boy, if you had," he shook his head, unable to finish. She looked down at her hands, the tremor still there. The boy's face seared into her memory, layering over another. A girl, a doorway, a hesitation. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she whispered it to herself. "I froze." Reyes frowned. "What?" Her voice cracked, quiet. "That's what happened before I froze." He stared at her, words lost. The admission burned, but it was also release, a wound unhidden. She opened her eyes again, steady now. "Not this time." Reyes swallowed, his voice low. "No, not this time." The night stretched long. Soldiers rotated watch. The civilians huddled close. The silence pressed harder than the cold. But she stayed awake, eyes fixed on the alleys, on the darkness that had swallowed the fighters. Her thoughts churned like restless waves. She knew they would be back. She knew this wasn't over. But for the first time since that doorway, since that silence years ago, she believed she could face it. Her ghosts hadn't vanished. They never would. But maybe, just maybe, they no longer owned her. Still, the question lingered, sharp as a blade. When the silence broke again, would she be ready? Why did the dawn feel wrong? The first rays of light stretched across the horizon, bleeding pale gold into the dusty sky. The village stirred faintly. A cough from the old man, a baby's weak cry muffled by its mother's shawl, the shuffle of boots as soldiers rotated watch. But beneath it all something pressed, a quiet too sharp, too deliberate. She rose from where she'd sat against the cold stone, shoulders stiff, rifle heavy in her arms. Her eyes swept the rooftops, the alleys, the lines where shadow met light. The silence wasn't empty, it was loaded. Her gut clenched. Then it came. The first crack of a rifle split the dawn. A bullet smashed into the fountain beside her, stone spraying into her face. She ducked, heart hammering, instincts flooding in. "Contact!" Harrow's voice roared across the square. Chaos erupted. Fighters poured from the alleys like water breaking a dam, rifles blazing, shouts cutting through the morning air. Civilians screamed, scrambling back against the walls, huddling close, clutching one another. Her rifle snapped up, her body moving faster than thought. She squeezed the trigger, one shot, two, a fighter dropped, another staggered back. Her pulse thudded steady, not panicked, not frozen. Reyes slid beside her, firing short bursts, face pale but steady. "They're everywhere." "Focus your lane," she shouted, the words sharp, anchoring. The square became a storm. Bullets ricocheted, dust exploded into the air, stone shattered. The sharp stench of gunpowder burned her nostrils. Harrow barked orders, dragging soldiers into cover, returning fire with precision. But the fighters had numbers. They pushed hard, surrounding, testing every angle. She shifted position, crouching low, sighting through her scope. She spotted one fighter slipping along a rooftop, his rifle trained toward the cluster of villagers. Her breath stilled. She squeezed. He fell, tumbling hard, weapon clattering. The woman with the two children, the one she had found huddled in that first house, clutched them tighter, eyes wide, their faces blurred with another in her mind. A girl, a doorway, that silence. She shook it off, pressed the trigger again. Another hostile dropped. Not this time. Reyes cursed beside her. We're pinned, they're tightening in. He wasn't wrong. The fighters were pressing harder now, closing the circle. The air was a wall of sound, gunfire, shouts, screams. Harrow's voice tore through it, steady but fierce. Hold the line, civilians stay down. She pivoted, catching movement in her periphery. A fighter broke from cover, sprinting low toward the villagers. Her stomach dropped. Reyes, cover me. She moved without waiting, boots pounding across the square. The fighter raised his rifle too close, too fast. Her shoulder hit him hard, slamming him into the wall. The rifle clattered to the ground. His eyes widened, his hands grasping for a knife. She didn't think. She drove her elbow into his jaw, grabbed the weapon, and fired point-blank. The crack was deafening. The fighter dropped lifeless. She froze for half a second, chest heaving, staring at his still body. A human, a life. Then a tug at her sleeve. The boy, the one who had nearly crossed to the fighters last night. His eyes were wide, terrified, but focused on her. His small voice shook. They will not stop. Her breath caught. He was right. She dragged him back toward the civilians, covering them with her body as rounds cracked against the wall. Reyes laid down, suppressing fire, shouting over the chaos. They're trying to break through the east side. Harrow's voice cut sharp through comms. Echo, push them back now or we lose this square. She pressed her back to the wall, breath ragged. The boy clung to her arm, trembling. Her eyes flicked to Reyes. He was pale, sweat streaking dirt down his face, but his jaw was set. We can't hold much longer. Her mind raced. They were outnumbered, surrounded, stretched thin. But the villagers, they couldn't be abandoned. Not again. Her chest burned. The ghosts pressed close, whispering, that girl, that hesitation, that silence. Not this time. Her voice was low but steady. We break their push. Reyes glanced at her, disbelief flickering, then he nodded. How? She leaned close, pointing toward the east alley where the fighters pressed hardest. We cut them off, hard and fast, before they flood through. Reyes exhaled, shaky but resolute. Then we do it. They moved. She sprinted low along the wall, Reyes at her side, bullets spitting dust around their boots. They slid into cover at the alley's mouth, hearts pounding. The fighters were coming, shadows darting closer, weapons up. Her hand brushed her grenade pouch, fingers curled around the cold metal. She glanced at Reyes. His nod was small, firm. She pulled the pin. The throw was smooth, practiced. The grenade arced into the alley, clattering against stone. A heartbeat of silence, then thunder. The blast shook the ground, dust billowing, screams tearing through the haze. Fighters staggered, disoriented. She and Reyes moved in, rifles sharp, cutting through the chaos. Controlled bursts, precise, relentless. Fighters fell. The alley choked with smoke and confusion. The push broke. The line held. Silence fell again, jagged and raw, broken only by groans and the distant shuffle of retreating boots. The fighters pulled back, melting once more into the alleys, leaving their dead behind. The square was still. Her chest heaved. Sweat ran cold down her spine. Her hands trembled faintly against the rifle. Reyes leaned against the wall, gasping, his face streaked with dust. He let out a bitter laugh, shaky but alive. We're still here. She didn't laugh. She looked at the civilians, at the boy, at the mother with her children, at the old man clutching his beads. Alive. She swallowed hard. Relief mingled with the weight pressing her ribs. They had survived, but survival wasn't victory. Harrow's voice rasped through the radio, breathless but sharp. Command, echo, hostiles repelled, casualties minimal, civilians secure, request immediate extraction. Static, then the faint reply. Extraction inbound, hold position. Hold position. She stared at the horizon. The dawn was brighter now, burning the sky with gold, but her gut twisted. The fighters had pulled back, not broken, not finished. They would come again. She sat on the fountain's edge, rifle across her lap, shoulders heavy. Her breath slowed, but her mind spun. The boy approached quietly, his small steps hesitant. He stood before her, his hands fidgeting, his eyes searching hers. "You didn't freeze," he said softly. Her chest tightened. The words hit harder than gunfire. She looked at him. This boy caught in a war he didn't choose, speaking a truth she had buried for years. Her voice was rough, almost breaking. "No, not this time." He nodded once, then turned, retreating back to his mother. She watched him go, her throat thick. For the first time, the ghosts in her chest shifted, not gone, but quieter. Reyes sat beside her, rubbing a hand over his face. "Think they'll try again?" She stared at the alleys, the rooftops, the silence. "Yes." He let out a long breath, nodding slowly. She tightened her grip on the rifle, jaw set. The silence wasn't gone. It was waiting. And so was she. Why did silence feel heavier after battle than before it? The sun was higher now, bleeding white heat into the square. Dust hung suspended, slow to settle, carrying the acrid bite of gunpowder. Spent casings glittered in the dirt like fragments of broken promises. The soldiers were quiet, moving among the wounded, checking ammo, sharing glances that spoke louder than words. "We survived, but just barely." She sat against the fountain, helmet off, hair damp with sweat, rifle across her knees. Her breathing had slowed, but her chest still carried the echo of gunfire. Around the square, the civilians stirred. Not with relief, not yet, but with a tentative searching for normal. The old man with the prayer beads muttered low chants. The young mother rocked her baby, humming something too soft to hear. And the boy who had once reached toward the fighters, sat cross-legged near her boots, watching her, silent but unflinching. She felt his gaze but didn't turn at first. She stared at the horizon instead, jaw tight, mind replaying every shot, every scream, every shadow. Finally she looked down. "What?" The boy blinked, hesitant. Then, "Why do you stay?" Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected words from him, not now. "Because we have to," she said. He tilted his head. "No, you could leave, but you don't." His eyes burned in a way too old for his years. He wasn't asking about orders. He wasn't asking about soldiers. He was asking her. The answer stuck like a stone in her chest. She opened her mouth, closed it again. She had no clean answer, only the truth that gnawed at her. She stayed because of ghosts. But she couldn't give that to him. So she swallowed and said softly, "Because some silences are worse than gunfire." The boy stared at her a moment longer, then gave the smallest nod, as if he understood more than he should. Reyes limped over, a bandage wrapped hastily around his arm, his face pale with exhaustion. He dropped down beside her with a groan. "Thought I was done back there." "You weren't," she said simply. He let out a weak laugh, shaking his head. "You always sound so damn sure." "I'm not," she admitted. That silenced him for a moment. He studied her face, as though realizing there were cracks behind the armor she wore. "Back in training," he said finally, voice quieter, "they told us hesitation would get us killed, but they never said it would haunt us if we lived." Her breath caught, his words cut too close. He rubbed his bandaged arm absently, eyes on the villagers. "I keep wondering if I'm strong enough for this, or if I'm just pretending." She turned her gaze on him. His shoulders sagged under a weight he didn't yet know how to carry. "You don't have to feel strong," she said. "You just have to keep moving." His eyes met hers, searching again, and for a moment she thought he might ask what had broken her once. But he didn't. He just nodded, and the silence between them held something almost like trust. By midday the heat pressed heavy. The square smelled of dust, sweat, and fear. Harrow paced like a caged animal, radio pressed to his ear, frustration etched deep in his jaw. Command says hold, extraction delayed, air too hot. Reyes cursed softly, of course. Her stomach sank. She had known, extraction never came easy. The villagers murmured, anxious. Eyes darted to the alleys where fighters had vanished. The memory of the attack hung over them like smoke. She watched them not as a soldier now, but as a witness. The woman with the 2 children whispered into their ears, forcing comfort into her trembling voice. The old man's beads clicked endlessly. The teenager stared at the ground, jaw tight, trying to mask his fear with stubbornness. They weren't numbers, they weren't burdens, they were lives, fragile, stubborn, enduring. And she wondered, if she hadn't frozen all those years ago, would another family still be alive? Would another village still breathe? The thought lodged like shrapnel under her ribs. She drifted into memory. The doorway, the silence, the child's eyes staring at her, wide, pleading as the man beside her raised his weapon. She had hesitated, a breath, a second. And the child had fallen. Her hands trembled now, even as she gripped her rifle tighter. She forced her breath steady, but the memory clung. A voice pulled her back, the boy again. Do you dream of them? Her heart jolted. She looked at him sharply, but his gaze was calm, steady. Who? She asked, though she already knew. The ones you can't save. Her throat closed. She wanted to lie, to tell him soldiers didn't dream, but his eyes demanded truth. Yes, she whispered. The boy nodded once, as though that answer mattered more than anything else. The afternoon dragged, the silence thickened. Every creak of wood, every shift of wind made hands tighten on rifles. The fighters would return. Everyone knew it. Reyes sat near her, head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed. Harrow muttered curses into the static radio. The villagers clung together, waiting, always waiting. She scanned the rooftops, the alleys, the horizon. Her chest ached with a familiar weight. Then a sound. Not gunfire, not shouting. Drums. Slow, rhythmic, coming from beyond the village walls. The villagers stiffened. The old man's beads slipped through his fingers. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Reyes opened his eyes, face paling. What the hell is that? Harrow barked positions now. She rose, rifle ready, heart hammering. The drums grew louder, closer. And then chanting, low voices carrying on the hot wind, a steady rhythm of words she couldn't make out but felt in her bones. The fighters were coming, not like before, not hidden, not sudden. This was different, deliberate, a march. The boy gripped her sleeve, eyes wide. They will not stop until someone makes them. Her breath trembled. He was right. The silence wasn't waiting anymore. It was ending. How many heartbeats fit into silence before it breaks? The drums answered, slow, relentless, each beat a nail in the air, each chant a shadow creeping closer. She stood at the edge of the square, rifle raised, eyes fixed on the narrow road leading into the village. Heat shimmered above the dust, bending the horizon into a wavering mirage. The villagers pressed together, clutching each other's arms, whispering prayers. Harrow barked orders, cover the flanks, don't let them surround us. But his voice cracked beneath the weight of what was coming. Reyes checked his weapon with trembling hands, muttering something she couldn't hear. And the boy didn't move. He stayed at her side, unflinching, eyes locked forward. His silence was heavier than the drums. The fighters appeared. First a handful, then more. Dozens. Emerging from the haze, faces painted, weapons raised, voices chanting. Not rushing this time, marching, showing their numbers, showing intent. Her breath slowed. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She waited. The silence stretched between beats of the drum, between steps of the march. A single shot could end the wait, but would it also end them all? The fighters halted at the far end of the square, a wall of bodies and steel. Their leader stepped forward, a man with a red scarf tied around his arm. His eyes swept the soldiers, then the villagers, then finally her. He raised a hand, the chanting stopped, the drums fell silent. The air itself held its breath. "You do not belong here," he said in a voice deep and steady, carrying across the square. His words struck like stones, not just an accusation, a promise. Harrow shouted back, "These people are under our protection. You'll get nothing from them." The leader's eyes narrowed. He took another step. "Protection," his gaze shifted to the villagers, "or chains of another kind." The words rippled through the crowd. Some villagers lowered their eyes, others stiffened with fear. The boy at her side clenched his fists. She felt it through her sleeve. The leader looked at her again. "And you, woman with the rifle, you hide behind orders, but do you even know why you fight?" Her chest tightened. His words pierced deeper than the desert heat, deeper than the memory of gunfire. For a moment, she was back in that doorway, back in the hesitation that had cost a life. The leader saw her silence and smiled, slow and cruel. "I thought so." The villagers shifted uneasily. Reyes raised his weapon, but his hands shook. Harrow bristled, barking, "Stand down," though it was unclear who he was speaking to, the fighters or his own men. The leader spread his arms. "Give us the boy and we will leave you alive." The square froze. Her eyes shot to him, the boy, standing small but unbroken at her side. His jaw clenched. He did not flinch. "No," she said, her voice sharp, steady. The leader tilted his head, studying her. "You would die for him." Her throat burned. Her grip tightened on the rifle. She didn't look at the boy. She didn't need to. "Yes." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossed the leader's eyes, then it hardened. "Then you will." He dropped his hand. The drums thundered again. The fighters surged forward. Gunfire split the silence. Muzzle flashes lit the air. The square erupted into chaos. She dropped to one knee, firing in controlled bursts, every shot precise. Reyes shouted beside her, his own fire cutting through the dust. Harrow's voice roared orders through the crack of rifles. The villagers screamed, ducking behind walls, clinging to each other. The old man's beads clattered against the stone. The young mother shielded her child with her own body. And through it all, the boy stayed beside her, his small frame pressed against the fountain, eyes wide but steady. She fought like she had always wished she had in that doorway. No hesitation, no pause, each pull of the trigger a vow. Not again, not this time. Bodies fell, dust rose, blood sprayed across the sand. But the fighters kept coming. The leader pushed forward through his men, rifle in hand, scarf whipping in the hot wind. His eyes locked on her, burning. Their gazes met across the square. And in that instant, the battle noise dimmed. The memory of the child she had lost bled into the face of the boy she now defended, past and present colliding. Her heart pounded, her breath caught. She raised her rifle. But the leader moved first. He fired. The shot cracked, the world slowed. She turned not toward the bullet but toward the boy. She threw herself across him, dragging him down, shielding his small body with her own. The impact slammed into her shoulder. White fire exploded through her chest. She gasped, the taste of iron flooding her mouth. But the boy lived. Reyes screamed her name, his voice raw. Harrow's gun barked fury. The soldiers surged, rallying with a violence born of desperation. She lay on the ground, vision blurring, breath ragged. The boy's hands clutched at her sleeve, trembling. "Don't stop," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was to him or herself. The boy's eyes filled with tears. "You can't leave," he choked. Her lips curved faintly, a bitter, broken smile. "I already stayed." Then silence. Not absence of sound, not emptiness. A silence that was full, heavy, sacred. The fighters faltered. The leader fell, a shot ripping him backward into the dust. His men broke, scattering into the alleys. The drums died. The chanting ceased. The square belonged to silence again. Reyes dropped beside her, hands pressing desperately against her wound. His eyes wild, his voice cracking. "Stay with me, please, stay." She reached weakly, fingers brushing his wrist. Her touch stilled him. "Protect them," she whispered. Her gaze drifted to the boy. His small frame, his burning eyes, his silence that had spoken louder than anything. Then her eyes closed. The last breath slipped like a secret into the hot air. The village stood in the hush of aftermath. The sun tilted low, shadows stretching long. The villagers stepped out slowly, warily into the quiet. The boy stood tall beside her still body. He did not cry, he did not speak. Reyes sat slumped, head bowed, bloodied hands shaking. Harrow stared out at the horizon, the weight of command finally heavy in his eyes. The old man raised his beads again, murmuring prayers not just for her, but for all of them. And the boy finally whispered words that only the silence seemed to hear. She stayed. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't warn. It doesn't plead. It simply takes one step. And in that silence, lives are saved.